She walked me to the back of her dining room, smiled at the nearest table, and said, in a voice that was perfectly pleasant and perfectly loud, "Forgive the arrangement. The help tends to sit in the back." I was wearing my good pearl earring. I had made the effort, for once. I sat down. I picked up the menu. I thought about a 12-page document in a locked drawer at home, with her signature on page 11. Then I ordered the Low Country shrimp. Good day, dear listeners. It's Lena again, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and tap the like button. It helps these stories reach the people who need them. And tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. People always say that family businesses are complicated, that they blur the line between love and money until you can't find either one. What I've learned is that they only get complicated when someone assumes the love means the money is theirs too. Bettina Stanton had built her restaurant on the assumption that everything in that building, every table, every chair, every good bourbon on the shelf, belonged to the story she told about herself. She was not wrong about the story. She was wrong about whose name was on the operating agreement. My name is June Stanton, and I am a certified public accountant who has spent 15 years restructuring the finances of small restaurants and independent retailers in the Charlotte metro area. I have seen the same failure pattern more times than I can count. The owner knows the food, knows the room, knows the regulars by name and by usual order, but does not know the numbers. By the time someone brings in the numbers, it is almost too late. 4 restaurants in Charlotte I have pulled back from that edge. Stanton's was the 5th. I pulled it back quietly, without credit, because that was the arrangement. And then Bettina decided to remind everyone in the room what she thought of me. The restaurant was called Stanton's. 20 years in the Noda neighborhood. Warm wood and exposed brick. The kind of institution that Charlotte people are quietly proud of and take for granted at the same time. Bettina Stanton had opened it at 47, with money she had saved and borrowed and argued for, and she had run it as a personal court ever since. The food was genuinely good, low country cooking, the kind of menu that does not need to reinvent itself because it already knows what it is. The room was warm. Bettina moved through it the way she moved through everything, with the unhurried certainty of a woman who knows that the room is performing for her. I had been eating at Stanton's on my anniversary for 8 years. I had always sat at the center table. Until the 9th year, when Bettina decided something had changed. My husband Gareth had come to me 3 years before the anniversary dinner in a state of genuine alarm. The restaurant was $140,000 in arrears. A tax lien had been filed. 2 primary suppliers were threatening to stop delivery. The payroll account had $8,000 in it, against a payroll obligation of $23,000 due the following Friday. Gareth had not told his mother how bad it was. He had told me instead because he had married a CPA who specialized in exactly this kind of crisis, and because he trusted my discretion, which he knew was absolute. I spent 3 weeks reviewing the books. Revenue was actually reasonable. The problem was cash flow management, supplier terms, and a lease amendment that had been signed without adequate review. The restaurant was salvageable. The terms of the salvation, however, would need to be structured carefully, because the person who provided the capital would need legal protection, and the person who currently operated the restaurant would need to continue believing she was in control. I proposed the structure to Gareth on a Tuesday evening in his car in the Stanton's parking lot. I would provide $240,000 in capital from my own savings, which he knew I had, in exchange for a 52% managing member interest in the Stanton's Charlotte LLC. Otto Steinberg, my business attorney, would draft the operating agreement. Bettina would sign as minority member. She would continue to run the restaurant exactly as she had. The arrangement would only become relevant if something changed. Gareth looked at me for a long time. He said, "She won't understand what she's signing." I said, "She'll have every opportunity to read it and to seek counsel." He said, "She won't." I said, "Then that's her decision." He arranged a kitchen table meeting with his mother the following week, described it to her as sorting out the paperwork for the investor situation, and placed the operating agreement in front of her. She signed the member consent page without asking for a copy. She signed the 12-page document without reading it. She had not asked about it since. The first warning sign before the anniversary dinner came in language. In the months leading up to it, Bettina had begun referring to me at family gatherings in the third person. Gareth's wife mentioned something about that, rather than June said. The grammatical distance of a woman reasserting a hierarchy she felt was slipping. I noted it and said nothing. The second warning was documentary. I received the seating chart for the anniversary dinner as a PDF from the event planner Bettina had hired. My name was on the chart. Table 9. I pulled up the restaurant layout. Table 9 was the back table, nearest the kitchen pass, under the lower ceiling, with the swing door audible through the plaster. I arrived in my silk blouse and my good pearl earring. 60 guests, the main room warm and beautifully lit, the amber light on the old wood doing exactly what it was designed to do. Bettina moved through the dining room like a woman presiding over her court, which she believed entirely that she was. She found me near the entrance and walked me to the back personally, which I had not expected. It would have been simpler to let the event planner seat me. Instead, she stopped at the adjacent table, the one with the Stanton family's oldest friends, and said it, in that pleasant and perfectly calibrated voice. Forgive the arrangement. The help tends to sit in the back. I felt the nearest table register it. I felt the quality of a room that has heard something it doesn't know what to do with. I reached up and touched my pearl earring, briefly, the one I almost never wore, the one I had put on because I had wanted, for once, to be in that room as a full person. Then I sat down. I ordered the Low Country shrimp. I ate dinner. I waited for the evening to end. I drove home alone. Gareth had stayed for the remainder. I sat at my kitchen table in the silk blouse in which I had been insulted and looked at the locked drawer across the room. I thought about 9 years of careful quiet. I thought about $240,000 I had put into a business that had been drowning and was now profitable, and the credit I had never asked for and had never received. I thought about Bettina at the adjacent table, smiling at the Stantons' oldest friends as she said what she said. I had asked only to be present in the room. She had answered. I called Otto Steinberg from my home office the morning after. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. Are you ready to exercise? I said yes. The formal notice went out that Friday. Registered mail, return receipt requested. Addressed to Bettina Stanton as the minority member of Stanton's Charlotte LLC, from June Stanton as the 52% managing member, calling a members' meeting pursuant to the operating agreement. Otto had drafted it in 40 minutes. It was 4 paragraphs. It was entirely procedurally correct. Bettina called Gareth within an hour of receiving it. Gareth called me. He said, She didn't know, June. I said, She signed it, Gareth. There was a pause. He said, I know. Bettina retained a business attorney, a Charlotte commercial practitioner named Ward Tillman, who had a good reputation and who, within 3 days of reviewing the operating agreement, called Otto and asked whether there was a settlement path. Otto said the managing member was open to a conversation at the members' meeting, which was already scheduled. Ward asked Otto whether June intended to dissolve the restaurant. Otto said no. The managing member's interest was in restructuring the management to a professional operational structure, not in ending the business. Ward went back to Bettina with this. She did not find it comforting. I understood that. The outcome she was facing, retaining her minority interest and her name on the sign, but losing the floor, the hiring, and the seating chart, was precisely calibrated to be something she could not legally resist and could not emotionally accept. Both of those things were true simultaneously. I moved the back table to the center of the dining room for the members' meeting. I had not told anyone I was going to do this. I had called the floor manager the morning of and asked him to move it before Bettina arrived. When she came in with Ward Tillman, the table she found was the one she had seated me at 2 months before, now positioned exactly where the center table usually stood, the operating agreement lying open on it. Otto was to my right. I was at the head. Bettina looked at the table placement for a moment, and then she looked at me. It was the first time in 9 years that she had looked at me without performance in it. Something else was there instead, though I could not have named it precisely. I said, "Shall we begin?" Ward reviewed the management restructuring proposal. Otto presented the operational plan, professional general manager, current staffing levels maintained, Bettina's name and image retained in the restaurant's public materials. Ward confirmed there were no legal grounds to refuse the proposal under the operating agreement's terms. Bettina sat very still throughout. When the meeting was over, she stood and gathered her things and walked to the kitchen door, the door that had been her domain for 20 years, and stopped. She did not look back. She pressed her hand flat against the door for a moment, the way you press your hand against something you are learning to leave. Then she pushed through. She looked away first. The general manager I brought in was a restaurant industry veteran named Anita Desai, who had restructured 3 Charlotte dining institutions and had a gift for honoring what was already good. Within 6 months, the kitchen was running clean, the supplier relationships were current, and the back table had become the most requested seat in the house. Anita had redesigned it into the most intimate dining spot in the room, with a direct view of the open kitchen pass. It became a feature. Reservations for it ran 2 weeks out. I returned to Stanton's for Gareth's birthday in October, 8 months after the members' meeting. I sat at the center table in a different blouse and the same pearl earring. The dining room smelled of good bourbon and low-country cooking, exactly as it always had. Bettina was at a corner table with Constance and an old friend. She nodded at me across the room. I nodded back. That was all. There was no warmth in it and no hostility, just 2 women who understood, finally, what the arrangement was. The cost was this. I had loved the restaurant once, or loved what it could have been. The warmth of the room, the amber light on the old wood, the anniversary dinners at the center table when Gareth and I still believed we were all building something together. I lost that at the back table, under the lower ceiling, beside the kitchen pass. It does not come back. The pearl earring is still in my jewelry box. I wear it to different dinners now, at different tables. If you are ever publicly dismissed by someone who has forgotten what you quietly hold, remember this. You do not have to announce what you have. You only need to know it yourself. What would you have done? Would you have shown her the agreement that night at the dinner? Or would you have waited the way I did? Tell me in the comments. Share this with someone who has ever been sent to the back of the room. Thank you for listening. There are a few more things I want to tell you about those weeks, dear listeners, because the space between the anniversary dinner and the members' meeting was not simply waiting. The revenue numbers at Stanton's, when I reviewed them post-restructuring, told a story that Bettina had never had to read. The restaurant had been running at approximately 71% of its potential capacity, not from lack of customers, but from scheduling inefficiencies and a comp and discount policy that Bettina had been running on instinct rather than data. She comped tables for her friends, discounted for regulars whose loyalty she was rewarding personally, and had no systematic tracking of the pattern. The result was that a room that grossed $1.2 million annually was netting considerably less than it should have. Anita identified the pattern in her first operational review and addressed it without drama. A structured loyalty program, transparent comp policy, and a kitchen scheduling system that cut prep waste by 18% in the first quarter. Within the first year under Anita's management, the restaurant's revenue increased by 22%. The figure that matters to me, because I am a CPA and figures are how I understand things, is the return on my initial $240,000. Measured against the restaurant's appraised value growth and the annual distributions I received as managing member over the 3 years following the restructuring, the effective return exceeded anything I might have achieved in a comparably sized investment in a more conventional vehicle. I have never discussed this number with anyone at the Stanton family table. I have no particular desire to. Gareth and I have found, in the aftermath, a version of our marriage that is honest about what each of us holds and what each of us is willing to protect. He knows what I did and why. He knows I would make the same decision again. He has not asked me not to. There are marriages that survive clarity. Ours, it turns out, is one of them. The back table at Stanton's is booked 6 weeks out now. The wait list has 11 names on it. Anita told me this in an email with exactly 2 exclamation points, which, from Anita, is the equivalent of a standing ovation. I find this deeply satisfying. Not because it proves a point. Bettina's cooking and Bettina's warmth and 20 years of Bettina's vision are in that room, and always will be. But because the right management structure made more room for all of it. That is what a good restructuring does. It does not replace what was there. It builds a frame that lets what was there be as good as it can be. The pearl earring is in my jewelry box, on the left side, where I keep the things I reach for when something matters. I know where it is at all times. That is, I think, the only thing I need to tell you about it. What Bettina did at the anniversary dinner was cruel in the specific way of cruelty that has been rehearsed. Cruelty that knows its own audience and performs for it, that times itself for maximum effect, that uses the language of etiquette to say something that etiquette would not permit if stated plainly. I understood all of that in the moment. I also understood that the document in my locked drawer was already true, had already been signed, and would not be less true because she had said what she said. Patience in those situations is not passivity. Patience is the posture of someone who knows the outcome and is simply allowing the other person to arrive at it. Do you know that feeling? The feeling of holding something quietly, in a situation where showing it would be easy, where showing it would feel satisfying, but knowing that the right moment is later, not now. Drop your city in the comments and tell me, have you ever waited for exactly the right moment? I want to know who is listening to this tonight. I want to give you a fuller picture of Bettina in those weeks after the notice arrived, because the transformation was something worth understanding. She had spent 20 years as the unchallenged center of that dining room. She knew every person on her reservation list by face, if not by name. She had trained her staff personally, correcting posture and pour and phrasing with the authority of someone who had built the standards from scratch. She had comped tables for people she liked and made it feel like a gift rather than a discount. The restaurant was, in every social and emotional sense, entirely hers. The operating agreement had not changed any of that for 3 years. It had simply waited. When Ward Tillman called her and explained that the document she had signed gave June 52% control and the right to call management meetings and restructure operations, and that there was no legal argument available that would change that fact because she had signed it with full opportunity to seek her own counsel and had declined, she did not speak for several seconds on the phone. Ward told Gareth later that the silence had lasted long enough to become uncomfortable, and that what Bettina said when she finally spoke was not what he had expected. She said, "I didn't think June would ever use it." Ward said, "The document doesn't require her to tell you in advance." She said, "No, I suppose it doesn't." That sentence told me more about Bettina than any of the pleasant cruelties had. She had known, somewhere below the level she was willing to examine, that the document existed. She had signed it. She had simply decided that June would not use it, that June was not the kind of person who used things, that June's quietness was the quietness of someone who accepts rather than the quietness of someone who is waiting. She was wrong about that distinction by 12 pages. The members' meeting lasted 92 minutes. I know because I timed it. I had prepared the management restructuring proposal over 3 evenings at my kitchen table, with Otto's input on the LLC mechanics and my own operational knowledge of the restaurant's specific situation. The proposal was thorough and fair. It preserved Bettina's minority interest, her name, her face in the marketing materials, her right to be in the restaurant every day if she chose. It removed her from the hiring decisions and the operational budget and the seating chart, the 3 areas where her management had been, in the data, most costly. It gave Anita Desai the authority to run the operation day to day, within a budget framework I set quarterly. Bettina read the proposal during the meeting. She read it slowly. Ward read it with her, occasionally placing his finger on a specific clause and leaning in to say something in a low voice that I could not hear. When they finished, Ward looked at Otto and asked 2 procedural questions that Otto answered in 1 sentence each. Then Ward set the proposal on the table and nodded. There were no grounds to refuse. Bettina picked up the pen. She signed. She put the pen down with the specific deliberateness of a woman who is performing composure. She stood. She walked to the kitchen door. She stopped. She pressed her hand flat against it. She did not look back. I watched her leave. I watched the door settle closed. I thought about the 20 years she had spent building something that was genuinely worth building, and the 3 years she had spent dismissing the person who had saved it. Both things could be true. They were both true.